Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ballast Exercise Podcast. I am Sam Trotta, the founder and current host, at least, of the Ballast Exercise Podcast, where it is my mission, as it is with everything I do as an exercise professional, to help everyone listening feel, function, look, and live better through exercise. And today's topic might be a bit taboo in today's day and age, the way the way many conversations, I should say, go around this topic. Today, I'm going to talk about what I like to call 6 pathways to permanent fat loss. Now, as soon as you say fat loss, there are going to be people out there who are a little bit triggered by this idea, who have very extreme opinions on it, one way or the other. And so I'd like to say a few things first about the topic and how I am at least going to attempt to approach it. No one's perfect, but I'm going to attempt to approach it in a certain way. So the first thing I'd like to say is I think there needs to be, in the whole conversation around fat loss, a mid ground and an openness to conversation about the idea. I don't think it's reasonable to say that perfect bodies are all that are acceptable in this life. One, because there's no such thing as a perfect body. And I do believe that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Okay. And two, because shaming someone for not having a certain level of physique or a certain aesthetic of physique is just simply wrong. And anyone, in my opinion, who would do that has bigger issues to work on. At the same time, okay, on the flip side of that coin, I don't think it is right to deny the idea that excessive body weight and furthermore excessive body fat, and there's some nuances to those there's some distinct nuances to those two ideas, excessive body weight versus excessive body fat. In any case, I think it's wrong to deny that either of those things and both of those things can have a negative impact on one's health. So when we're talking about pathways to permanent fat loss, what we're really talking about here is a health effort. What we're really talking about here is a way of framing the idea of fat loss in such a way that it has nothing necessarily to do with one's aesthetic, though if that's the reason that you're choosing to engage in it, I have no judgment about that. Really, the way I like to look at fat loss is as a reflection of health, that if you have currently what you or what a medical or other kind of health professional would assess as an excessive level or an unwantedly high level of body fat, or as famous Dr. Peter Attia likes to say, you're in an overnourished state. And that probably applies to more than just fat loss, but it would at least apply to fat loss. That you're choosing to engage in a fat loss process for your own purposes and as a reflection of health. So we're not looking to lose fat here in as fast of a way as possible at the expense of our health, because that is possible. And traditionally, frankly, especially in the exercise industry, that's how it's been done. We're looking to engage in this fat loss process here as a reflection of health, both physical health as well as mental and emotional health. So a bit of my own background with this. I actually got in, so I've been an exercise professional. I've been in the personal training and fitness industries since I was 17 years old. So doing some basic math, subtracting from 40, that puts me at 23 years in the health and fitness industry. I started exercising when I was 15 for precisely the reason I'm talking about today, because I was a heavy kid. I was about 250 pounds coming out of 10th grade, or if you're listening in the US, that's my sophomore year. I was 15 years old, turning 16 in any case, and I was sick of how I felt. I was sick of how I was living. I was sick of how I looked. I was sick of how my stomach was bothering me all the time, and that was, now that I look back, no doubt in great part to do with how much I was eating and the kinds of foods I was eating, and I needed to make a change. And with sparing you the boring details of my ups and downs with fat loss, it took me a while to get a hold of the principles that actually help to keep body fat at bay. Now, one thing I want to clarify is that when we're talking about fat loss, and we're talking about fat loss as a reflection of health, and the way I see it, I'm not necessarily talking about becoming, shredded and ripped with, abs that you could do your laundry on. I'm talking about attaining a healthy, sustainable, and long term achievable level of body fat that keeps disease at bay and keeps your body looking, feeling, and functioning how you want it to feel. So, when we talk about these 6 pathways to sustainable fat loss, it actually starts, in my view, way before the acts typically associated with fat loss, like nutrition and exercise, though we will talk about those things later. The idea here is that, in my experience, first things first, um, we do need to talk about the consequences of unhealthy fat loss, what this shouldn't look like. The main problem with the way fat loss is typically sold is that you're told that you can lose body fat in a typical marketing campaign instantly and easily, and you want to believe it because it's true. There are crash diets, there's shakes, there are cleanses, there are punitive exercise. Uh, yeah, I'll just say it, scams that promise you results now. And that's so tempting because you want it to be true and you might not know any better. And that's not your fault. It may not be your area of expertise. You know, just because we have YouTube and Google doesn't mean we're all exercise experts. It means that we're more prone than ever, both to finding out good information around anything related to exercise and health, including fat loss, and bad information, misinformation, I might even say disinformation. And when we take these unhealthy sort of crash approaches to fat loss, and this is probably nothing new, you've probably heard this before, it leads to weight regain and sometimes getting to a body fat and body weight level that's higher than when you started your fat loss process, decreased overall health based on the stress on your system, and poor self-image because you may see it as you having failed in your fat loss attempt. So this leads to a vicious cycle, and it just, instantiates this whole shame that we feel about our bodies and how we might feel about having failed, or in our own perceptions failed at the process of losing fat. So, the kind of fat loss process that I like to engage in whenever I'm in a fat loss mode, okay, or the kind of fat loss process I like to engage in when I am coaching. Most of my clients come to me for pain issues, more mechanical issues, and sustainable lifestyle issues than anything else. But when there is a client that I deal with that whose main focus, or has at least some level of primary focus on body fat, I like to tell them that it doesn't require drastic, painful efforts. It's actually better achieved with a less is more approach, and engaged in properly, I believe that it can be a healthy process, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. It's a willingness to engage in this whole process in a long-term way, knowing that less is more and slower is better, not expecting results quickly. And I'll go so far as to tell people, look, if you want instant fat loss, go ahead and, speak to somebody else, because I'm not interested in it, because it's not healthy. And if it's what you want, that's fine. I'm not judging you, but I'm not your guy. So if that's something you're interested in, that sort of quick and easy fat loss, there are literally thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of approaches and products and things you can get to help you with that. And I say good luck, wish you well, but this isn't the podcast for you. If you're someone who's interested in permanent, long-term, sustainable fat loss as a reflection of health that takes a mindful and progressive approach to the whole deal, then keep listening. All right. And I hope all of you have kept on listening, because I would like to pass this information on. It has been tremendously helpful to me, and I hope it's helpful to you as well. And when we talk about path one, okay, or step one, however you want to phrase it, I like to call it triage. Now, when you think triage, you might think of an emergency room. You get put into triage so that you get put into a priority sequence to be seen by an emergency room doctor. And if you are where I am in Toronto, that can sometimes take 24 hours. And maybe it's not a particularly pleasant image for you. All I mean by triage is really prioritization. There are some questions that you want to ask yourself. If you have been thinking to yourself, man, I need to lose fat, for a really long time, and maybe you've tried, and maybe you've in some sense succeeded, like you've seen the number on the scale fall, or you've seen clothes fit a little more loosely, but you haven't you've either bounced back from the weight loss, fat loss, or the look that you got, or the function that you attained through the process left you sort of wanting for more, or thinking you might have gotten a different result than the one you did. you know there are a few questions to ask. One is fat loss really important to you? Is it true? Not really as in degree, I should have said. Maybe, is it truly important to you? Is this something that you're actually focused on? Okay. Because if you keep saying, I want to lose fat, I want to lose fat, and maybe you do, and maybe you don't sustain it, um, it could just be that you're saying it's a priority for you without it really being a priority for you. Maybe there are influences in your life that are pushing you to care about fat loss, but maybe you don't care that much for whatever reason, whether it would be a good idea to care or not. And one of the reasons I bring this up is because it has to be important. Any goal of any sort, not just an exercise goal, has to be important to you first in order for you to achieve it. So if you have a parent or a partner or a friend who's telling you, you need to lose weight, you need to lose fat, you need to do this, and you're doing it to sort of appease them, I won't say it's never going to happen, but it's way less likely to happen than if the drive towards that goal is actually coming from your mind. Now, if it's something that would be healthy for you to do, and it's something that would benefit you both objectively and subjectively, maybe you would just enjoy your life more with a little less body fat on your body for whatever reason. I hope you get into it. I hope you make it a priority at some point so that you can enjoy all of those benefits. But if it's not important to you right now, consider in some kind and loving way to yourself, leaving it aside and figuring out what is important, if anything, to your physical health right now. Maybe it's getting a mechanical issue in order if you're having knee or back pain or something like that. And openly, fat loss can help with those sorts of issues by taking the mechanical load down on your body. At the same time, getting those mechanical issues addressed in some fashion can also help with fat loss. So they sort of feed each other. And if one is a priority for you, address that first. Okay. And the other context in which I mentioned triage, where, maybe you succeeded with your fat loss and you didn't quite get the result that you wanted. When I ask the question, is fat loss really important to you? Another way that could be interpreted is by saying, is that your actual goal, or is that the right pathway to your goal? So a lot of times, this happens with men and women. I might venture to say it happens with women more often based on sort of aesthetic stereotypes and exercise stereotypes that still, unfortunately, still persist for women in gym culture and the fitness industry, though it's less than ever. And I'll talk about that later. That's a good thing. They still persist, though. Sometimes people will engage in fat loss and they don't end up, if it is for an aesthetic reason, looking the way they do. Maybe a muscle gain effort was, more directed at what you were trying to do. Maybe there's some other exercise or health-based effort that you could have gone through that would have gotten you the real result that you wanted. So it's important to be discerning about this. So when I say, is fat loss truly important to you, then I'm asking it in two contexts just to sort of sum this point up. Is it important to you in terms of, is it actually important to you? Is it a priority for you? Okay. And I'm also asking, is it truly important to you, as in, would something else fit the bill? Okay, that much better. All right. Now, one other point that I'd like to go through before I go to point 2 or step 2 in this 6 steps or 6 pathways to permanent fat loss is, when you're looking at fat loss long term, it might not actually look like fat loss at first, particularly if you're someone who has attempted to lose body fat many times before, or maybe even on sort of a constant basis, where you go from eating very, very little to perhaps binging or eating way more than you ought to in order to sustain yourself. That can have carnage, that can create carnage, frankly, on your metabolism. So fat loss might not actually look like fat loss at first. Fat loss at first on a long-term sustainable way might actually look like eating more. It might actually look like gaining a bit of weight, gaining a bit of body fat before losing it. Now, if it's done properly, and this is popularly called reverse dieting, it's not something that I'm an expert on. Intuitively, it makes sense to me though. If it's done properly, the weight gain period would be relatively short. It would also include getting a lot of valuable lean muscle tissue, which both of those things in the long term will help with your health based, sustainable, permanent fat loss. So that's the triage step there, with a little bit of a bonus on fat loss, not necessarily looking like what we typically see as fat loss at first. Now, step two, it gets a little racy here, and I have to be careful how I speak, not because I'm afraid of offending anyone, but because I want to be clear about what I'm trying to articulate here. So, step two is optimizing your own sense of self importance. Now, you are important. I'm important. We are all important as individuals. Okay. Downplaying your individual importance below a certain level is self sabotage, and it's no good. At the same time, when we engage in certain health efforts, uh, we often overdo our sense of self importance. So, when we're engaging in fat loss, let's keep in mind that it's probably not worth alienating yourself from your family and friends throughout the fat loss process. And if you're listening to this soon after it came out, I'm recording this on December 14th. 2023. We are 11 days out from Christmas. I love Christmas. I'm Italian, so it's a big Christmas Eve and a big Christmas Day. And there's two huge meals in there with lots of desserts and pastas and good stuff. And I don't think, unless there is an extreme circumstance at play, I don't think it's worth losing traditions, alienating yourself, isolating yourself from the people and the traditions that you love the most, okay, in order to get a little ahead or stay a little ahead in the fat loss game. This might not be the best time of year to start a fat loss process. At the same time, now's as good a time as any. And if you go through, 9 days, 10 days of a great, stick to it process of sustainable permanent fat loss, and then have a couple of Christmas meals and take a couple of steps back, great. You just get back to it. I don't see there being any issue with that. We're thinking about progress, not perfection. And we're thinking about it in the context of not overly inflating our self importance, particularly when it comes to the family, friends, and traditions that we love the most. All right. I hope that resonates with you. I hope it didn't come across as offensive there. I do want to make sure that you see yourself as important, and staying connected to the people you love the most is essential to maintaining that level of self importance, if that makes any sense. So, path three, or step three, is about sustainability. Now, I've never shot a bow. I've never shot a bow and arrow. So in some sense, I feel silly for using this analogy, but if you pull back a bow and it's loaded with an arrow, once it's released, the arrow goes so far the other way that the magnitude is exponential, okay, based on how much you drew the bow back. And that's the physics of that. And I'd like you to take this analogy and apply it to extreme or hardcore fat loss efforts. Now, a lot of times people shy away from fat loss because they think they have to give up all the foods they like. They have to do painful exercise. They have to eat only foods that taste like crap, like boiled chicken and broccoli. And if boiled chicken and steamed broccoli with nothing on them taste good to you, then I hope I didn't offend you. But for most people, a little seasoning goes a long way. So we think of fat loss efforts, and many people tend to think of fat loss efforts in terms of extremes, and it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, for long-term permanent results, sustainability is so key. Hardcore and extreme is just a fun way of saying unsustainable. Now, there are outliers who thrive in hardcore kinds of situations where they're eating very dogmatic diets and doing extreme uh, exercise and other fat loss related efforts, and let the outliers be the outliers. And if you are an outlier and you thrive in that kind of situation, more power to you. For the vast majority of people, I'm going to say um, uh, 80 to 90%, maybe even higher, 90, 95% of the people engaging in fat loss, a slower approach, a sustainable approach, one that's a little more gradual, is going to be healthier, and it's going to lead to more permanent results or closer to permanent results. So, the thing that I want to emphasize is that sustainable fat loss efforts, okay, add to your sense of physical ability and your overall life experience versus giving you a sense of deprivation, pain, and suffering. And this goes back to step two, which is optimize self importance. It tends to be when people go too hardcore. Oh, I want to lose some body fat. So I'm going to go on an extreme diet and I'm going to exercise for many hours every day. And I'm going to stay away from social events where there might be trigger foods for me, or where there just might be something that tempts me into being a little less than perfect. Okay. And that's not sustainable. It leads to isolation, it leads to extreme behavior. And like I said, for most people, it leads to both unhappiness and a bow and arrow effect, where once you get sick of it and you say to hell with it, you go so far back the other way that not only are your hardcore efforts erased, you're back further than where you started. So the effort needs to be sustainable in order for it to be permanent, and in order for you to in order for it to be a reflection of health and healthy habits. So some signs that your path of fat loss is sustainable: you might feel some increased energy. Okay, if you feel better, if you feel like it's easier to wake up in the morning, if you feel that you're more clear-headed during the day, if you feel more enthusiastic generally about the things you do, it might be that this physical process is having a positive effect on you. In terms of a pace, okay, in terms of a pace, you don't want to lose more in terms of watching the scale. You don't want to lose more than 0.5% of your body weight per week. And that sounds like a small number. If you're coming down from 200 pounds, okay, and that's a weight that you don't want to be at. That's a weight that you don't want to be at. You want to be lower than there. You don't want to lose more than a pound a week. Now, in your first, depending on what you're doing, even if it is sustainable and reasonable and gradual, you might lose a few pounds in your first week. Some of it might be water loss. It's that sort of jumpstart effect that these programs tend to have. Generally speaking, though, you don't want to be losing more than about a pound a week or 0.5% of your body weight per week, and that's assuming, like I said, a 200-pound person. Now, you might also be adding some lean muscle. The lean muscle is going to take more than 1 week to show up. Certainly in a 1 pound format, it's going to take more than 1 week to show up. But you want to be losing about 0.5% of your body weight per week, while gradually adding muscle over time. You also want to be walking around with a little or no sense of deprivation. And again, I'll say you and your loved ones want to be walking around living your lives with little or no sense of deprivation. Okay. So your spouse shouldn't be rolling their eyes when you're ordering at a restaurant. Okay. And if they are and you're being reasonable, that's another question. I'm not a relationship therapist, but I did have one on in episode 4 of this podcast, and you can contact Haley Patry if you feel like your spouse is trying to sabotage your reasonable fat loss efforts. But that said, they should not be rolling their eyes in the back of their head because you're asking the waiter what type of oil is used in the salad dressing. This is not necessary. Okay, at least not for this goal. And some are, assuming this show gets big enough to be heard by multitudes of people, I might get some hateful comments at that last piece. That said, when it comes to at least triaging the situation and making sure that this is sustainable for you for the long term, little questions like that cause more pain than they do progress. All right, so let's try to stay away from that kind of behavior. You should be enjoying the process. It's actually fun. It's actually great. There's this one I teach when I talk to my kids, or my youngest is only a year old. When I talk to my 7-year-old about food and nutrition, and I borrowed this from former IFBB pro bodybuilder Ben Pekulski, who's another Toronto-based fitness guy and really good guy, very, very, very smart guy. especially in the bodybuilding space. That came out wrong. He's a very smart guy, period, and he's a smart guy in the bodybuilding space. Um, he explained nutrition to his kids in this way, and I borrowed it from him. It goes as follows: there's food that's just good for your body, but it doesn't taste good in your mouth. And there's food that just tastes good in your mouth, and it's not really good in your body. Okay. And then there's food that tastes good in your mouth and is really good in your body. And that last food is the food that we want to eat the most. So it's great to be eating foods and doing activities that feel good in your body, that you actually enjoy doing, or you're getting an increasing sense of enjoying doing and having. Okay. And it's turning out positive health results for you physically, mentally, and emotionally. And to complement that, other signs that that you're on a sustainable path to fat loss is that you find your outlook on food, health, exercise, and your life in general to be increasingly positive. I mean, if you're engaging in fat loss as a reflection of increased health in your body, then all those things should be happening. So if you've either started on that path or you're engaging on that path and you want it to be sustainable, watch out for those 5 or 6 things that I mentioned. Now, step 4 is more about awareness of food than anything else. Step 4 and 5 might sound pretty similar. I'm going to try to distinguish them as much as I can. Step 5 is going to be solid nutrition. Step 4, though, is awareness of food. Now, no matter what any nutrition zealot says to you, a vegan, a carnivore, a paleo, anyone walking around with a nutrition book like it's a Bible is touting a religion, not a strategy. Okay. And just because something works for someone doesn't mean it's going to work for someone else. For some people, a vegan diet would be hell. For some people, a carnivore diet would be hell. For some people, flexible dieting, where you can, sub some cookies in for sweet potatoes based on the caloric equivalent, would be hell. Some people do better with a little more dogma. Some people do better with a little more flexibility. In any case, awareness of food matters. Okay. That's why I put it in a step 4. The frequency, amount, and content of your food matters. Yes, calories matter. Okay. Calories are not everything, though. When we go back now, again, I might get attacked depending on who's listening to this. At the end of the day, okay, calories in, calories out is what matters the most to fat loss. Okay. What the things that influence calories out are long listed in nature. All right. Not everyone's basal metabolic rate is the same. And it is possible for people that are in an extremely obese state to eat very, very few calories, okay, and not lose weight based on the metabolic disorders that they have. So, calories in, calories out, eating less is in some sense the story, but it's not the full story, okay? Now, on top of that, food enjoyment also matters. This goes back to the whole idea of optimized self-importance, and it goes back to the idea of sustainability. You have to enjoy what you're eating to some extent. Maybe it's not potato chips and ice cream, okay, which in depending on your state of mind might be the most enjoyable things you can think of. You might have something else, chocolate cake, uh, deep fried shrimp, I don't know, things that are calorically dense and potentially nutritionally sort of void. I love myself some deep fried shrimp, but it doesn't happen too often. I also love cake and ice cream. It also doesn't happen too often. When they happen, I enjoy them. For the most part, I do my best to consume foods that I enjoy and are conducive to my health without being overly calorically dense and without being hyper palatable, where I find myself wanting more of them, even though I'm completely full. And there's no reason for me to eat more other than for the sake of eating more because something in my reptilian brain says have more of that stuff. All right. Calories do matter. Food enjoyment also matters. How you eat matters, and it's a matter of individual self assessment. You'll notice I don't use the term what works for you because people tend to use it as a throwaway phrase. Just do what works for you. What you think works for you very well may not be what actually works for you based on what you say you want to accomplish. I know a lot of people say, I just do what works for me and I'm trying to lose body fat, and they've been at the same body fat for the last decade. So it's not working. Face facts. You just don't want to change. And if you don't want to change, that's fine. Just say, I don't want to change. I'm good. I say that I want to change because it's kind of the in vogue conversation, but I want to change. Is this actually a priority for you? It kind of goes back to step one. Circling back to awareness of food, one thing you can do, and I know this is a reported trigger for a lot of people, and this might get people to turn the podcast off at this point. I hope it doesn't. Tracking food in some way can help you create awareness of food. Now, like the diet and like the exercise, a lot of people go too hardcore with this. They download these elaborate food trackers and they're seeing, oh, am I getting you know, adequate amounts of vitamin B3 here? What foods do I need to eat? Oh, but there's too many calories in that. No. Like, take it easy. Get an old school notebook and a fucking pen and write down what you ate in a very general way, almost nondescript. Take it easy. Easy does it. If you start there and you want to get into more elaborate food trackers because maybe you either have reason or just general interest, maybe it's fun for you after you do the basic pen and paper tracking to go into more elaborate tracking, go ahead. Absolutely go ahead. Have fun with it. Make it part of a sustainable program. Make it part of an optimized sense of self-importance rather than being perfectionist about everything. Being perfectionist with any of these things is the equivalent of pulling back the bow and then shooting that arrow off way into space that is so far away from fat loss, there's no way you're gonna find your way back, or it's gonna be very difficult to find your way back. So start with maybe a simple tracking system, okay, and move to more elaborate tracking systems as time goes on. If you're feeling triggered, and I'm waving my little mini fan in front of my face about the triggering thing, and I make light of it. I feel like some people use it again as a throwaway term. All right. If you are genuinely or disingenuously feeling triggered by the idea of tracking food, sometimes saying out loud, I am now eating a slice of pepperoni pizza, is enough to create a little extra awareness of food. Say it out loud. I am about to buy myself a double bacon cheeseburger and a large fries. Say it out loud. I'm about to buy myself a no dressing spinach salad with 3 ounces of chicken. Those are both extreme meals. Those are all sort of extreme meals one way or the other. Does that feel right to say it? Does that awareness of what it is you're about to do? I am about to take part in a 90-minute hot yoga class, and I've never done yoga in my life. I haven't jogged in the last 5 years, and I weigh 250 pounds, and I'm about to do 10 miles. Does that sound right to you? Does the badge of honor of going extreme in any of those things feel right when you say it out loud? If you were to tell someone who truly loves and cares about you what you're about to do, what might their reaction be? Just thinking about these things can help create awareness. So, awareness, not just of food, I guess, but awareness of activity, awareness of how you're feeling is a huge step in this whole process. Okay. So, now, brass tacks, solid nutrition basics are essential to sustainable and permanent fat loss. So, here's some guidelines. Protein is literally the building block of your nutrition. Okay, there are a couple of different ways you can go about your protein. A lot of people like to just say for women like 120 to 140 grams a day. For men, it's more like 160 to 180. Now that's based on body weight a lot of times. So another way you could say it is 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. Uh, I like um, I like Dr. Gabrielle Lyons' guideline, which is 1 pound, 1 gram, 1 pound, geez, 1 gram of protein per pound of optimal body weight per day. Now, maybe you don't know your optimal body weight. Maybe you have a number that you're shooting for. Okay, go for that number. Start eating that much protein. So if your optimal body weight is 150 pounds, start eating 150 grams of protein per day. All right. Now that ought to likely be spread out over 3 to 4 meals. Now, 40 to 50 grams of protein per day, depending on who you are and whether or not you know what that looks like, might sound like a lot. Okay. It might take some getting used to. So if you've been eating very little protein, let's say you're someone who's been getting just kind of a minimal amount of protein in your body every day, you might want to progress up slowly, build up over, a few weeks to your optimal amount of protein. But any of those measurements are good ones to shoot for. 1 pound per body weight, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, 1 gram of protein per optimal pound of body weight, 120 to 140 grams, or 160 to 180 grams. There are a bunch of other ones. I would say the number one in my view to get started, very simply, is 1 gram of protein per pound of optimal or desired body weight per day. Now, a couple of interesting things about protein that have come out since you probably spoke to your doctor about it, if you ever have spoken to your doctor about it. So there used to be the recommended dietary allowance for protein in the US and in Canada was quite low. I think it was something like zero point 0.3 grams of protein per pound of body weight per day. So a 150-pound person would be eating was told to eat no more than 45 grams of protein per day. And that was for concerns about kidney health and in many instances, because so many people get their protein from meat sources, which is another topic I'll talk about, heart disease and other fears around heart disease and other issues related to cardiac function and eating too much meat. Now, that's all been debunked. That has all been debunked. And again, if there's a doctor listening to this that's ready to throw me out a window, I'm basing what I'm saying off of medical research, the latest medical nutrition research, or science-based nutrition research, not anecdotes, not some guy I know at the gym. This is science. You just might not have read it yet. And the new science says that optimized protein consumption is somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.7 to 1 grams of protein per pound of body weight per day. So the recommendation for that same 150-pound person falls in line somewhere, like, rather than being 45 grams a day, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 105 to 150 grams of protein per day. Now, a 5-ounce piece of chicken breast. Now, this is boneless, skinless, and I'm not saying to only eat boneless, skinless chicken breast, but as far as I know, a 5-ounce piece of boneless, skinless chicken breast cooked 5 ounces is about 40 grams of protein. So you can think of it as somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 chicken breasts per day. Now, there are a lot of different protein sources. For people who enjoy eating meat, it's very easy to get ample protein, or it's much easier to get ample protein. A couple of servings of animal flesh in ample size, and a whey protein shake should get you to your desired protein intake for the day. For people who are vegan, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that plant-based food is not as rich in protein, okay, as animal-based food, and it comes with other things. So a lot of plant-based people will talk about beans and legumes being rich in protein, and they're also rich in carbohydrates. If you're on a fat loss mission, if you're in a fat loss process, you just have to watch the total caloric consumption that comes with getting your protein from plant-based sources. Now, the vegans come back at me and say, yeah, you'd have to watch the same thing with meat sources and fat. And I'd say, yep, you're absolutely right. So no matter what you're doing, no matter where you're getting your protein from, please make sure that you're watching your total caloric consumption and tending towards leaner sources of protein. Now, the meat people are going to be out there saying, I can't believe you're talking about vegan sources of protein. And it's like, well, yeah, I am, because the latest research also shows that whether you get your protein from meat sources or whether you get your protein from vegan or vegetarian sources, and you can talk about belief all you want in this, just like you talk about belief in Santa Claus, the research is showing that it doesn't make much of a difference, if any at all. Now, there are going to be people who cherry pick certain pieces of research saying that the plant-based is better, and there are going to be other people who cherry pick other pieces of research saying that the meat-based is better. I love meat. I love vegetables. I eat it all, so I don't care. If you want to scream from your soapbox about one being superior to the other, go right the fuck ahead. At the end of the day, for people out there who are just looking to sustain a health-based, permanent fat loss process, just get your protein in, no matter where it comes from, okay? Solid nutrition basic part 2, vibe with fiber. Get lots of fiber in your diet. Now, this is one place where the vegans have an up on the meat people, because so much of their food is so rich in fiber. Beans, green vegetables, fruit, many fruits, not all of them, are so rich in fiber. It would be great if we could all get a minimum of 30 grams of fiber per day. All right. Now, fiber is not only, protein and fiber. One of the things that is great about both of them is that they're hugely satiating. Okay, they're hugely satiating. So if you eat a lot of, like, a solid amount of protein, a good serving of protein, an appropriate serving of protein, and a solid serving of fiber at every meal, that meal is likely to keep you fuller for longer with less of a caloric impact. Sounds like it's pretty sustainable in terms of fat loss, and pretty effective in terms of helping you with your fat loss as well. Now, I've mentioned this before. So look at 30 grams, look at different sources. If you're someone who can tolerate grains, and this is another conversation that gets people enraged. If you can tolerate grains, grains are a great source of fiber. Whole grains are a great source of fiber. I tend to stay away from them. They tend to agitate my little tummy. They always have. So for that reason, I stay away from them. That said, if it doesn't do the same thing to you, or if you're not aware of it doing the same thing to you, pay attention. And if they don't, great. You got your fiber, you got some good carbohydrates in there. Great stuff. Um, Eat foods that you like. Period. The end. Do not force yourself to choke down stuff that you don't like. You will not do it for long. End of story. I'm not going to say any more about that. Okay. Water, water. Drink half an ounce, okay, of water per pound of body weight per day, approximately. Start there. There are going to be people who talk about electrolytes and weighing yourself after rigorous exercise. To hell with it. Just divide your body weight by 2 and drink 1 ounce of water for each half pound of body weight. So I weigh approximately 200 pounds. I try to drink 100 ounces of water every day. That's a little over 3 liters. I usually get that done by about 2 in the afternoon because I'm doing 1 to 2 workouts a day as well. So I have to drink more water than a person who's working out, say, 3 times a week. All right. Now that's me. If that's not you, fine. Stick to the 1 ounce per half pound of body weight per day. If you weigh 150, it's 75 ounces. That's like 2.5 or so liter, little under 2 1/3 liters of water. You can do the math. You can do this. The water also helps to keep you fuller. Now, my friend Julia, big up to Jules if she's listening to this. She's a nutritionist. She's a natural nutritionist, and she's actually the one who let me know a long time ago when I first met her in like 2010, that a lot of times when we feel hungry, it can actually be a thirst signal. Now, I haven't fact checked this, but I also don't see Julia as someone who would lie to me or misinform me given her level of education and experience in nutrition. So when you feel hungry and you don't feel like you should, maybe you just ate, or you had a big breakfast and it's not even close to lunch yet, try drinking a big glass of water. You might just be thirsty, and that might be just enough to get that hunger signal at bay and give your body what it actually needs, water versus more food, pushing you towards optimal hydration and away from overnourishment. Okay. Now, this is going to sound counterintuitive, and I've alluded to it already, talking about my most favorite time of the year, Christmas. Indulge from time to time. Now, caveat with this is, if you are someone who has any sort of binging issue or binge eating disorder, first of all, you have my full empathy. I don't know if I was ever diagnosed with it, but I've certainly been prone to binging during periods of the past. So whether there's a label on it or not, I can definitely empathize with you. Maybe indulging should be extremely limited to you. Okay. Unless you're someone who's prone to binging or has a diagnosed binge eating disorder, please indulge from time to time. Take a break from what you're doing. Have a croissant and a chocolate chip muffin for breakfast. Some people say once a week. Some people say a couple of times a month. I wouldn't do it every day. All right. Unless you're really good at flexible dieting, you don't really have any trigger foods or anything along those lines. Do indulge. It actually can help long-term with the fat loss process, based on certain hormonal reactions that your body might have to what we would typically call, in what a lot of people, and I shouldn't say we because I'm not in this space, what the physique people call a refeed. So it might actually help your fat loss long term. It might actually help accelerate it, even if you do feel a little bloated and have a bit of weight gain from a day of indulgence. Do indulge from time to time. Just make sure from time to time doesn't slip to every hour on the hour or anything close to that level of frequency. Those solid nutrition basics should help you on your path to sustainable and permanent fat loss. Now, step 6 is heavily reflective of my bias as an exercise professional, and I completely admit that. Effective exercise is extremely important in your path to permanent fat loss. Now, a lot of it became trendy, not particularly, not too long ago, it became trendy to say, oh, fat loss has nothing to do with exercise. It's all about nutrition. And I can see where that came from, okay? Because there would be people who say, oh, I just walked on the treadmill for an hour. I can definitely have a dessert tonight. I can promise you, you're walking on the treadmill, burnt maybe 400 calories if you're a big person who can walk really fast. Maybe you cracked out 500 calories in that time. The dessert that you're about to eat is at least that much. And the challenge with this thinking is that it sort of ties back into the optimized self-importance thing, but basically the math doesn't work. There's no way you're going to out exercise a bad diet. Okay. Now there are those people out there who say I can eat whatever I want and I just stay lean and ripped all the time. Well, then they're not out dieting their exercise. They're just simply somehow, some way, not crossing that threshold where they're taking in more calories than they're putting out. And there are multifactorial reasons for that. Okay. If you're trying to lose fat and you're saying to yourself, I just did a whole bunch of stuff today. I can eat whatever I want tonight. It's simply not true. Now you should indulge from time to time, but this is the stigma, or this is what brought the stigma to exercise as a means to fat loss. The truth is, exercise is extremely important to permanent fat loss, and it's extremely important to the health parameters that surround permanent fat loss, and particularly, and this is going to sound sort of redundant, so my apologies for that, particularly permanent fat loss as a reflection of internal health. Okay, resistance training is probably more important. Yeah, I'm going to say it. There's going to be people who get at me for it. That's fine. Get at me. I'm available. Resistance training is more important for effective fat loss than aerobic exercise. Now, before I go into why aerobic exercise can help with fat loss, okay? Aerobic exercise is hugely important for health. I engage in at least 2 bouts of aerobic exercise per week for 40 to 60 minutes. If I can get 3, that's great. I also engage in some form or another 3 other bouts. I do my best to get 3. Sometimes it's only 2, but 3 other bouts of anaerobic exercise. All right. Now, anaerobic exercise is closer to the kind of resistance training I'm talking about. That's so crucial and effective for fat loss, but aerobic exercise is very important to your overall health as well. All right. Resistance training is crucial for fat loss because it helps build muscle. It helps build muscle exponentially more effectively than aerobic exercise. All right. Your muscle is your metabolic machinery. And in fact, the nutritionist scientist I mentioned earlier, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, she's brought up this, look her up on Instagram. She's great. She's a very valuable resource in this. And her whole view, and it's one that I tend to agree with, okay, is that we should actually stop focusing on fat loss and we should actually focus on muscle health. And if we were to focus on muscle health, fat loss would just happen. Now, that's probably true, but it's a harder pill to swallow and it's a tougher thing to do in some ways, psychologically and maybe even physically too, for a lot of people. The reason resistance training is so important beyond building muscle is that when you lose weight, okay, some proportion of the weight that you lose, no matter how you're doing it, is going to be muscle and lean tissue, and some proportion is going to be fat. What resistance training has been shown to do in studies is maximize the proportion of fat loss in the weight loss process compared to muscle loss versus people who just restrict calories and maybe do some aerobic exercise, though I think aerobic exercise had a bit of an effect on, I can't remember whether or not it had a bit of an effect on this. Let's just say people who just diet, who just restrict calories, lose a huge proportion of muscle, okay? Relatively speaking, I think it got up to upwards of like 40% of all weight loss was lean muscle tissue. Now, this has been a concern for semaglutide drugs, or people who oppose the use of semaglutide drugs like Ozempic, and I can't remember the names of any of the other ones, frankly. But the truth is, that that it causes muscle loss in a fast way. The truth is, so does caloric restriction, uh, unabated by resistance training. So whether or not you're on some sort of semi-glutide drug, and if you are, that's fine. And if it's helping you and if it's helping save your life, that's absolutely fine. I certainly have nothing against that. I got nothing bad to say about it. But do some resistance training. Make sure that the weight you're losing is useless weight, is excessive fat is not useful. uh, Appropriate amounts of fat in your body are not only useful, they're necessary. Excessive fat, like excessive anything, is just that, it's excessive. The muscle on your body is so vital, okay, to keeping your system working well at a mechanical level, at a hormonal level, okay, and at other physiological levels too. Aerobic and anaerobic exercise, like I've said, is also beneficial. Okay. And like I said, avoid getting stuck in out exercising your food. But the benefits to your mental and emotional health that come from exercise will also help to ensure that you're successful at your fat loss process for the long term, even at a point where you are done with the actual loss of fat and you're just looking to maintain what you've done. Don't stop working on the problem, okay, after you think you've solved it. Avoid that rebound, avoid that regain. Keep eating the foods that are good for you. Keep that sense of optimized self importance about you. Triage your priorities. I'm done with fat loss now. Maintenance is a goal. Maintenance is absolutely a goal. Keep focused on maintaining what it is you've achieved for yourself, that increased level of health that has led to this decreased level of body fat and a whole brand new life for yourself, because it absolutely, absolutely could be. So, things that you can do today to start losing fat in a painless and permanent way. Start your day with 8 to 16 ounces of water. I got this big, I took my daughter to a couple of Toronto Blue Jays professional baseball team games this past summer, and she convinced me to get an overpriced souvenir cup. And I absolutely did. And I now use that overpriced souvenir cup. It's about 24 ounces. And I fill it probably two-thirds, three-quarters of the way with water. And before I put my feet on the floor in the morning, getting out of bed, that water's down my gullet. It's absolutely done. Okay. And it's a great way to get some water into your system first thing in the morning. Hydration is a foundational principle of anything health related. Okay. Engage in some kind of food tracking, okay, or even food consideration. If you're not willing to write things down, try saying out loud, I am about to eat, and fill in the blank there. Does that sound okay with you? Now, there are people with disordered eating or with eating disorders, and those are sort of different in my mind, for whom any of this food tracking might be actually triggering and inappropriate. That's fine. Try to be aware of your food as much as you possibly can in a healthy way. And exercise and eat in a way that challenges you, okay, but also allows you to recover and enjoy your life. Those are some great ways you can get started on the path of permanent fat loss. Just to review, we have these 6 steps to painless permanent fat loss. Triage: is it important? Are you actually aiming at the right thing? Okay, optimize self-importance. Am I doing this in a way that's healthy for myself and that's not alienating me from anyone else or isolating me from the people, places, and things that I love the most? Sustainability: can I keep this up? Okay, is this actually healthy? Will I be able to do this for the long term? Awareness of food: some kind of tracking, something, some action that you take to be aware of the food and the exercise that you're engaging in and with. Solid nutrition basics: 1 gram of protein per optimized pound of body weight per day, or per pound of optimized body weight per day. 30 grams of fiber. Eat foods that you mostly like, that are good for your body and for your mouth, like Ben Pakulski told us a long time ago. Half an ounce of water per pound of body weight per day, and indulge from time to time. Effective exercise: start with some resistance training, appropriate resistance training. Get aerobic and anaerobic exercise a couple of times a week as well. The benefits to your mental and emotional health will absolutely help to ensure that your fat loss efforts are sustainable and successful for the long term. I do hope you've enjoyed this. I hope that none of my cursing or opinions have triggered you or upset you in any way. And if they have, please send me an email at sam@striation6.com, and let's have a conversation, because Maybe we can learn a couple of things about each other. Have an excellent day. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.